Thank you so much for letting me come and talk again on your user group. Today, I'm going to talk about UDFs, right? So we have two UDFs available for Power BI. So what are the differences and how do I use them? So my name is Zoe Douglas, and I am a feature PM for the Power BI and Fabric user group. So this means that I've been working on features, including DAX Query View, Direct Lake, the Info DAX functions, Model Explorer, Optimize Ribbon. Those are the features that I have worked on. And I'm now working on reports and core visuals. What I'm not working on is either of these UDFs. Actually, I do now with the core visuals own the translytical task flow, but there's another PM who led that originally and is going to take over very shortly. But follow me on LinkedIn. I post stuff that new things that we're releasing. If you're interested in any of these things, go ahead and follow me. I do post some stuff about what we're doing. All right, so let's get into it. So as I said, I'm not the direct PM for either of these features. So I'm just going to give you kind of an overview and point you to some really good resources as well. So what are these two features called UDF? The first one is the DAX User-Defined Functions. So these are really cool. So these are a way to define your very own function in DAX. Now they're found in DAX in Power BI semantic models. And they're a way to reuse DAX logic or patterns in a semantic model, similar to the way calculation groups work, except the way calculation group work is you have the calculation item which you apply onto a measure, and then they kind of apply universally. So you can put it on a report page, and all the measures in that report page are going to kind of honor the selection of which calculation item you did. Now that's a little bit different than the way you can do reuse with the DAX user-defined functions, because now it's a function, just like you can have any function, like a sum is a function in DAX. And in a measure, I can just simply reference this function and utilize it in that measure. So it's very scoped down. So it's very targeted. You have to actually utilize it, whereas the calculation group is very kind of overreaching or overarching kind of change of logic. Now, also another really cool difference with the user-defined function is it can return a scalar value or a table of values, which means you can use it as an input to another function, so one that can take table values or one that can take scalar. A really cool one for the table too is I had a request from a customer a few years ago. They wanted to they wanted to share kind of a DAX query to their users from their semantic model, but they didn't want to share the whole DAX query for them to put in Excel or put into another Power BI semantic model. They wanted to just say, hey, point him to this object, which will return a table. And you can do that with the user-defined function. So you just do evaluate user-defined function name, and it will return a table of values. You can add parameters like a customer name or client name or product, whatever it is you want to put, so they can pass in parameters and have it filter that table as well. So it's a really cool example of kind of flexibility. There's a ton of nuance to these things. And we have some really good documentation. So let me see if I can just open this up real quick. So here we have the DAX user-defined function preview page, a lot of great information. So here we have the DAX user-defined functions page, a lot of great information about how you can define these. You do it in DAX Preview or Tyndall View, how you can save them. A lot of really great information here. All right. So what is the other UDF? Okay, so where are you going to create this UDF is inside a semantic model in DAX Query View or in Tyndall View. Here we have DAX Query View. You use a define block, and then you say define function, you give it a name, equals. In the first parenthesis, you put that parameters, if they're optional. You don't have to put any parameters in, actually. And then the kind of equals with the greater than, and then you put the definition of kind of what you're going to return. This one is simply multiplying a number by 110% to get the added tax as 10. We'll go into an example kind of later on. Now, what is the other UDF? So the other UDF is the Fabric User Data Functions, right? So our Fabric functions, these are found in your workspace, right? So you're creating these in Fabric. They require Fabric, the DAX UDFs do not. And it's a way to reuse logic or patterns, but this time in many Fabric sources. You can utilize it in a Power BI report, or you can utilize it in a pipeline or a notebook, all these kind of things. And it does something rather than return something, right? So the common example in Power BI was just translytical task flows, doing write back to the model. So it can write data to a SQL database in Fabric. It can also delete data, right? It can do API calls. Very, very cool. A lot of functionality with these user data functions. It's using Python, right? So the UDFs in Power BI semantic models are the DAX ones. These are Python. So here we have some really great information. Like this is the integrations. We have translytical apps, the activator, notebooks, and pipelines. And we can have these links later. So here's a quick kind of view. If you go to that workspace and you go to new item, you're going to pick the user data functions. And inside of that artifact that's now in your workspace, you can create these functions. You can have multiple in the same kind of artifact. They have as samples that you can utilize. And you can see that this is just Python. And you have a kind of similar structure. You have the name, and you have some imports, and you can have parameters, you can pass parameters, and all that kind of stuff. Right, so back to Power BI land. We have access to both of these, right? So we have the DAX UDF, where you can add them to a semantic model. So they live in the scope of the semantic model. Anybody who has access in creating reports off that semantic model can also use these UDFs. I'm not sure the IntelliSense is working in a Live Connect scenario, but you can utilize them. And they can be used in any kind of DAX, like so your DAX measures, your calculated columns, your calculated tables, calculation groups, right? Wherever you can use, just in a DAX query, you can write a DAX query and utilize these functions. Now the Fabric UDF is added to the report, right? So the DAX UDF is added to the semantic model used by the report. And then the Fabric UDF is kind of added to the report, and it can be used as part of the translytical task flows. So if you're not familiar with the translytical task flows in Power BI, they use the text slicer to take input. You attach the UDF to a button, and then you can type something in. You can tie that text input into a parameter that is associated to that UDF. And you can also filter data and bring that data from those filter actions via kind of measures. So you create the measures to get the selected values from the filters you've picked. And then it packages it with a button click to send the parameter and run that UDF that we just created in Fabric, which is really cool. So let's take a look at its documentation here. The example I'm actually going to show you, I actually did from the documentation. They have a really good tutorial. It can run you through how to set this up, what to do step by step, and try it out yourself, right? So you have to create the SQL database, create the user data function, and create the report, add all the stuff and hook it up, and then you can just try it out. So here they have some really great examples shown on the site. Data write back is probably the biggest one that comes up with the translytical task flows, but it's actually not all it can do. It can do some custom automation, and it does require some preview features to be enabled. All right, so here's kind of an example of the one I built, which is that tutorial flow that's up on that Learn doc. Here it has you create the AdventureWorks in the Fabric SQL database, and it creates this user data function. And then when I can update the description and then go ahead and click the button, it'll send it to the SQL database to update that record. And then if you're utilizing your reporting with Direct Lake or Direct Query, you can see that data coming. You can do it with import too. You just have to wait for the scheduled refresh or hook up a refresh. All right, so I talked about the text slicer for inputs. Let's talk about that one just a smidgen. So this is going to actually have a new name. It's in preview right now. We're planning on GAing it early next year. It's in the public roadmap at aka.ms/PowerBI roadmap. And again, so this one has kind of a dual purpose. So why is it called slicer if we're taking input? So we want to change it to input slicer because it has two purposes. When it's not data bound, like you saw in the example on the previous slide, I can just type something in and use it for the translytical task flows. We want to kind of broaden that scope a little bit, but nothing promised just yet. But if you can actually also put a text column attached to the slicer, and you can just type in something and it will filter the data in that column for the whole report for anything that kind of contains what you typed in. So if you're looking for a certain segment or kind of partial match, we are also going to bring in additional filter options. So right now it's just contains any, right? So if it contains any of the words you type in that data column, it will filter to those matches, but they don't really show you what those matches are. We're also going to bring in ways to say it contains none or is exactly or starts with. So give you some more controls. Those should be coming up in the next few months. That's a kind of sneak peek for you. All right, so here's kind of a little example. Here I have it hooked up to segment and on gov and mid. So you can see it's matching to government or mid-market. I can just type it in, I can clear it, and I can see that filtering my entire report. So I don't have to type in the whole thing, and I don't have to look for it in a value, a list of values. And just literally type in what I want and have it affect my report, just like any kind of slicer can. Okay, so I've given you some background. So let's go ahead and do a little bit of demo. Okay, first, let's take a look at kind of maybe there's a lot of really great examples up on the website and internet with the user-defined functions in DAX. One of my favorite ones, and the one I want to show you today, is utilization with dynamic format strings for measures. So this is a feature that I worked on a couple of years ago, and it allows you to conditionally kind of create a format string based on a DAX formula, which is really cool. So if you have this one here, I have sales amount with some kind of display units, but this display unit is granular enough to determine the value and how what the kind of value is of that measure, and then format it as it goes. So it's not going to be like the display format we have currently in visuals. It's very limited on options, and once it picks one, it does it for the entire visual. Now with the dynamic format string for measure, I can do something a little bit more targeted to exactly what I want. So here is my sales amount with the auto. You can see it has for low values, it just show them, then we go into thousands and all the way down to millions. And this not only works in a table, it works also on a visual. So here we have, this one's down into the thousands and these ones go up to the millions, and you can see across that visual, it works really well. But what if I want to reuse my logic here? So here I have it in this measure specifically, but if I wanted to add it to another measure, another sales amount, I would have to go ahead and copy and paste these in. If I wanted to make a change, I'd have to make it in multiple places. So a lot of times what people do is they'll put this logic in a simple measure and then they'll reference the measure here. But a better way to do this is actually with the user data function, because you can actually then pass parameters. Like maybe I want to have a parameter that specifies if this is currency or if this is just a number and not include that. You can also do, I have a trick in here for switching the locale, right? So if I can put it as English, I can put it as German, I can put it as Brazilian, whatever it is that I need, and I'll put it in a proper locale without having to kind of fuss with how to get the comma and the period kind of switched. It will actually do that as part of using the locale. And I can show that example in a minute. So here I'm just going to go ahead and copy this. Now I could have done this also in here. If I come to my Model Explorer, we have, so this is my auto. And here I actually do have a copy value here, so I can copy that. Here I can edit it up here in the format bar. But now I'm going to go ahead and create this function. So I've already started it here. Let me zoom it in. So here I have define function with kind of a name. You can have prefixes, right? So you can have them kind of organized over there. This is my parameters, which I'm not going to put any parameters in. And then I'm going to paste in that logic. So it's going to return whatever this is. Now I could keep this as probably selected measure, but I'm not actually sure if it'll work. So let's see if it'll work as is. Otherwise, I can actually pass the measure here in. So let's just try it. So I've added, and I can even, see if I can update this model. Okay, so now I've added it. If I come over to Model Explorer, you can see I have my function. I can even click on it when I'm in a model view, and it'll show me my logic here. So let's go ahead and try it out. Let's see if it works without having to change out that exact logic. So we'll say here, and we'll say dynamic format strings for measures. There you go. Display. And we'll hit OK. Let's see if it works. And it works. So I don't even have to pass, in this case, I don't have to pass any parameter. It's understood that I'm doing it on this one as no change at all, but now I can utilize this on other things. So I don't have to be limited to this one. So if I take, let's take, oh, I don't have another one here. If I come to this one doesn't have the dynamic format strings for measures, right? So if I wanted to reuse the logic, I know it's the exact same measure here. But let's go ahead and bring it in as well. And here we can see this is not formatted. It's showing me everything. The other thing you want to keep in mind when using dynamic format string for measures is you want to turn off that display units that comes on visuals, right? So the little default, that auto one, you'll have to just go and make it none so that it doesn't interfere with your dynamic format string. Right, so how we add this is we go to dynamic here up in the format. Let me just zoom in a little bit for you. So if I come up to here, I can hit that dynamic. It's going to add that to my measure. It's going to show me kind of what the static one looked like before I change anything. And again, I'm just going to do dynamic format string. And there is my thing here. I'll click here so we can see a little. And again, we can see that's now applied. Now, if I needed to make a change, let me just go ahead and move some of these guys' thumbs. I'm going to just leave it up there. Now, say if I want to make a change, right? Before, I'd have to do it each one divided to. But now here, and maybe I want to say this as K is not maybe exactly what I want, so around 2000s. And we'll spell this one out as, I'm not sure if there's a space or not. So I think I'll just put a space here as well. I'm going to put the S here. Come back to the beginning. Okay, and I'm just going to update that definition. Okay, and I'm going to go back to my page here, and you can see that it's changed in both of them, right? So I'm reusing this logic. I only have to change it one place, and I'm back in business. Right, so this is not the only way to utilize the user-defined functions. I'll show you the locale one real quick. Here we have, with the locale, the really interesting one is the Brazilian one. So if you come in here, you can see that when I do a kind of converted sales amount, this is just without any formatting, but here I am using the locale to actually return it in the proper way. So I don't have to know how all these things are formatted for each country. And here you can see that I have the period and the comma thing, which is actually quite difficult. It's actually utilizing the format function to, if I come into, this one is called locale, converted sales amount, and I can always see my format string here. Zoom in. So what it's doing is it's formatting the selected measure, which is the converted sales amount, as a currency using locale, which only the format function can do. Now, if I did that without those quotes at the end, it would try to format using the formatted number, which would not be a really great experience. So when you put it into those quotes there, now I can ensure that it's just returned as is, right? Looks like I put in a 1 accidentally when I enabled zoom it. So without that, let me show you. There you go. So you can put that in a user-defined function, right? So you have all these things and you can define the parameters. There's some really good kind of activities that go over like the parameters. One of the really cool things about the parameters in a user-defined function, more than say if you're using variables, you can have it have the same kind of use as a variable, right? If you define a variable and then you try to calculate on a variable, you find out really quickly they don't calculate again. With the UDF, you can actually specify whether it's an expression or value, and then you can actually put like filter context on those measures you pass through. So it'll pass through and then evaluate versus evaluate, then pass, which is quite neat. All right. So we've talked about the DAX user-defined function, and we see we're added to this model. We can use it in the report, and we can see it in the model over here. You can also use TimDLview, by the way. So if I wanted to, I could come over to here, drag it in, and I can again see that here I can reuse it between models. All this really good stuff that you can do in the TimDLview. Let me just zoom in a little bit so you can see. Very similar to actually to the DAX. Instead of doing the kind of override, you would just do apply to add it to a semantic model. All right, so let's go take a look at the user data functions that are in Fabric. So as I said before, you are going to add them in your workspace. So here's my workspace. I have created the SQL database that they told me to create out of the Learn docs. So you can go ahead and do that as well. And then they give you an example. So this is the user data function that I pulled from the Learn docs, and this is Python, and it's going to go ahead and take that parameter, and it's going to make sure it's connected, and it's going to update that product description, right? So here's that kind of insert statement that you can see here. So if you're familiar with SQL a little bit, you can see where it's doing that insert statement and kind of get an idea of the steps you have to do for the user data function. Now, if I come back to desktop, this is the kind of report I've created. This is my just text slicer. Again, so we have no data field here. So it's not filtering anything in this report. And you can see my button is disabled. I've created some text around it. And in the action over here, I have specified my data function. I can actually do any type of action, but the data function is the type that you want. Hit that FX, it'll open up the OneLake catalog. You can pick the user data function, the UDF that you're looking for. And then that product description is linked to that text slicer that I had. So it has this kind of long name to it. It has auto clear, and then I also have another parameter for the model ID, which I'm providing via a measure. So if you click on here, you can see that I have the conditional formatting, which is based on field value, selected product model. So if we go look for selected product model, now this is just a report measure because I'm in a direct link report. I had an error in here before, but now I just removed that error for now. And I'm just saying selected value, otherwise return blank from the product model ID. And if you had more than one kind of text selection on the page, you would see that other one here. Okay, let's see this in action. So say we have this one here. Let's see, pick a one. So this chain, right? So we're going to pick a chain, and I'm going to copy this value. And I'm just going to edit it up here. So paste it. Accelerated shifting performance for your bike. Okay. And now you'll notice this button hasn't lit up yet because I have to still accept the text change that I made. So I'm going to go ahead and hit this. And now you see my button is ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and do control click here, which will send that description to the user data function and update that value. Now you'll notice, so one of the things that I noticed with the example on the Learn docs is at first when I did it and I upped the description, it didn't update here because of the culture. So this is the culture English. But what happens is it's going to, so it's said it's done so it's done that, it's added it. And I came in here and I go to home. Actually, let's go to optimize and I'll do refresh visuals. So okay, so why isn't my thing showing the new latest data? What happens is it actually puts it in a new culture. So see if it works. No, not that one. Let's see if we can find it. These are all my other trials. Let's see. And we'll come in here. Okay, maybe we haven't gotten it in just yet. So let me go ahead and go to home and we'll go ahead and refresh and get the latest data. Okay. Okay, and then we'll look for this one. Ah, here it is. So here's the culture that it went under. And I can see that I have that updated description that I just typed in up there. Right, so I can continue to do this process and update this data, right? So this is really good for kind of changing the values you see in your report. You can also do some API calls, so try it out, check out the documentation. There's a lot of really good content and there's a lot of really great examples. But hopefully this makes sense now as to kind of what each of the UDFs are. We have the user-defined functions in DAX for your semantic model, and then of course for your report. And we also have the user data functions that have a Fabric feature. It's used with the translytical task flows in a Power BI report. Okay, so I've also included in this slide deck, which I'll share with you guys, is some more resources to check out, right? So there's a lot of really good videos. You put some of the guy in the cube has done a lot of videos on the DAX User-Defined Functions, as well as the translytical and also the user data functions. And I also wanted to point out on this one in September 2025 coming soon that we had an intern PM, Haley. She did a really in-depth video of kind of the capabilities of these DAX user-defined functions. You're looking for some more in-depth content. I would definitely recommend checking that out. All right, so thank you again for having me. Sorry I couldn't be there and presenting this live and hear your feedback and talk to you and answer any questions you have. Reach out, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to hear if you try this out. This has been helpful in understanding kind of the difference between the two UDFs. And I hope everybody has a wonderful holiday season. Thank you so much.